everyone. Welcome back. We are Cars Casually again. And today we're talking about Formula One because all my nephews are asking me about it and I need to know more, which no one ever would have believed before because I was a massive F1 geek. Okay, so we are here today with Den, who grew up in a motor racing family. We are here with Francis, who is a motor racing nut. We have Paulo, who is learning and apparently grew up when we were watching the old stuff and doesn't know who the heck Senna is. So we have to have that discussion.
Hey,
Anyway, so a
you
lot
know
of
who's
kids, a lot of people are into Formula One now. A lot of people are into Formula One now.
yeah.
And it came in a different way. When we grew up, when I grew up, we didn't in the Philippines. We didn't really have access to Formula One, so it was really the hardcore fans who would follow it. We would look for the write-ups in Road and Track. We would look for the news. We would try and watch whatever Patolo Ramirez put on TV. And now it's very, very different. And now, in a lot of ways, it might well be the renaissance of Formula One because you have just way better access than you ever have before. At least that's what I think. We're going to ask Paulo, our man in the street, about okay, why is it that people are watching Formula One more now than ever?
Yeah. First of all, I think when you say it's a renaissance, like I really think that's how it is because I believe like the golden years of F1 was like in the 90s and the Schumacher days in the 2000s, and then it kind of died off like after Schumacher retired. But yes, anyway, it's been so popular lately because number one, Drive to Survive on Netflix. So that series covered the, for the first time the 2018 championship season. So it was a different way of watching F1, of getting into F1. And if you ask a lot of new fans, if you ask your nephews, how did you start watching F1? It's because of Drive to Survive. That was a really key move for Formula One because in the early 2010s, in the mid 2010s, they were losing interest. A lot of people were complaining about just one team dominating, which was Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel. People were complaining about the taking out the refueling during pit stops. So that was a huge thing for them. Even now, if you ask, if I ask like my titos who stopped watching F1 around those times, so why did you stop F1? Watching F1? It got boring. One team dominating, no more refueling. The sound sucks. That's what they usually say. And I agree. I miss the old sounds of the V10s and the V12s. But you know, they the F1 put a lot of effort into digital, social media, and the big factor really in that was Netflix. People of different backgrounds, people who were not even interested in racing, they were they got pulled in by like the drama of F1, like all the politics in it. So that's also a huge factor for them, and not just the racing. And it helps that the drivers nowadays are like know a lot more with how social media works, so they're able to touch more people. So yeah, if you look at Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok, like Aston Martin and Red Bull are really big on TikTok. So like the newest social media platform, and it works. Like I was never really into TikTok at first, but then I started following the F1 stuff. There's some good content. I'm not afraid to say it. I have a TikTok account. So so yeah.
And time to look for Paulo's TikTok account now. Who knows, he might be making videos.
Yeah. On,
Okay,
on
so
on a more technical side, engines nowadays they use a 2.4 liter V6 with a turbocharged hybrid electric system. So for more old-fashioned fans, that sounds a bit wow. What happened from roaring V10s and V12s to that? So it's also worth understanding that their F1 did need to lean more to the sustainability side because back then they used to use a lot of fuel and they would get criticized by like environmentalists. So I mean, it's a good move to go to the smaller V6s and the hybrid electric.
do you remember the sound of the old engines?
I do. I mean, of course I do. Like I first watched started watching F1 during the Schumacher days, although it was just more for fun. Uh, I would watch it with my tito, stuff like that, but I didn't really know like the technical side of it. But I
You should hear
understand Francis.
you should hear how the old Cosworth V8 engine sounded, because they were just normally
Yun
aspirated
ata,
cars. Yung mga tipong
uh,
the like what you call this? The olden, the 70s race cars, Formula 1 cars before. They had no traction control, no nothing. Had manual gear
Yeah,
levers, diba? Minimal
there's one.
aerodynamics, diba? This is where the skill comes in. I mean, and different drivers have different styles. Like some drivers are very methodical about the racing lines and stuff. And if you have Gilles Villeneuve sliding into a corner, yung- the drivers had a lot of character, and they really differentiated how well they drive. They have their own different driving skill. Whereas today, they sort of follow the same racing line. They do everything more or less the same. It's just the cars that are different. But back then, you had drivers with different driving styles also, which added to the drama of watching Formula One race.
Well, Paula, what do
when I
you
would
think?
watch clips, oh yeah, uh, I agree. Like I would tend to agree, although I don't have the full knowledge of it, because I would watch clips of of old F1 races, and there would be some in-car clips, and you can see that the driver is really struggling with the steering
Yeah,
wheel. Like
yeah.
they really have to work a lot to
And
keep
there's
the
this
car in
clip of Jim
control.
Clark.
And
There's this clip of Jim Clark, diba? I don't know if you've seen that on YouTube. He has this clip, eh. I don't know if it's Donington or Silverstone, but there's a clip of him inboard driving. You can see the car controlling, the determination, and the commitment towards every corner without any traction control. Should see that,
yeah,
anyways.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Plus, they were using a gear lever. There, there were no paddle
Which is the way it
shifters.
should be.
Although, yeah, although current F1 cars even now never had traction control. So I guess that adds weight to them, and I think it would be really like a cheat na if they have traction control. But yeah,
Actually, they
although
had
I
traction
think,
control,
I,
but in a different way. They had traction control to make sure they could put the power down. It was kind of that's remember I don't know that chopping of the sound that you hear. That was something coming
yeah,
in
yeah,
to adjust. So it was actually the reverse of what we think of as distraction control in modern road cars. But anyway, okay.
so
One of the
like when
things
you did
that
downshifting.
yeah, one of the things that we're sure about is that it's much safer. Okay.
Definitely.
Oh,
Um, uh,
definitely.
there were times, and there are the famous crashes at Nurburgring, for example, where the guy sitting there in the car burning because no one can get to him, and the racers stop to pull him out because there's no way an ambulance will get there on time. And that's very different. And now you have things. A lot of people don't like the halo. A lot of people didn't like the hands device. Any number of things they don't like. But the truth is, they save lives. Just like we complain about technology in our modern cars, but the truth is, they save lives. Paolo, I know that you were raptly watching the race. What are your thoughts? Right now, that's probably the biggest race accident we've seen in a while in terms of the controversy going. Can you walk us through it and what you
Yeah.
saw?
So last weekend was the Italian Grand Prix in Monza. The two championship leaders, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, they had bad pit stops. Max was idled for 11.1 seconds because there was a problem with the rear right tire, I think. And then Lewis, a lap or two after that. It was a bit long as well, but just 4 point something seconds. So eventually, when Lewis got out of the pits, Max was right beside him. And I think they were like at the P9, P10 already because of the pit stop, after slow pit
Yeah.
stops. Anyway, turn one and turn two in Monza is very popular for accidents because it's very tight, especially coming from a long straight and Monza, the long main straight. Anyway, at turn two, they eventually crashed, which was bound to happen because of how tight their race is, how aggressive they've been driving
How
with each other
tense,
the past
how
this
tense
whole
it has
season.
been. Yeah, the
How
entire
tense, yeah,
season.
yeah. So I'm trying not to speak in a biased manner, so I'm choosing my words carefully.
He's
But
being so
but but
careful.
basically, but basically, when Max hit the sausage curb on turn two, when his left tire hit the sausage curb, he was pushed against Lewis's rear left tire, and this led to Max, like the car jumping and landing on top of Lewis's car. So before it landed fully, before Max's car landed fully, it hit the top part of Lewis's car and eventually down to the halo. So this was Max's right rear tire. And then when it hit the halo, it kind of pushed Lewis's crash helmet down, the rear tire of Max. So that was like the scary part. But good thing the tire didn't stop there. It eventually landed on more on the front wing of the Mercedes. So people were like we're focusing about the safety here. I'm not going to talk about who's at fault and whatever because that's a more difficult part to talk about. But yes, in terms of safety, the Halo, ever since it was introduced, I think 2 years ago, has had a lot of examples of saving lives and minimizing injuries for drivers. And I think there's no question now that people are thankful, even drivers who were critical about it before it was implemented, they're thankful to have it now. Because even before what happened in Monza last weekend, the biggest example of the importance of a halo happened in Sakir last year when Romain Grosjean had the big accident in, I think that was Bahrain. That was the second leg of Bahrain, I think. Uh,
The crash leading to a
yeah,
fire.
yeah. So it was a very awkward crash. He hit the wall without a tire barrier. It was just really like a solid barrier, and the car ended up like going inside the barrier, and the car was on its side, and without the halo, Grosjean's head would have gotten the impact. So there are talks that without the halo, he might have been unconscious, uh, and he wouldn't be able to get out of the fire. So there are a lot of like technological improvements that I guess at first people thought that it made Formula One boring, but in terms of safety, like the last time there was a casualty in a Formula One race was in 2016 with Jules Bianchi. Yeah, he was Italian. He was like a prodigy for Ferrari, but he never made it to the Ferrari seat because of the accident. So back then there was no halo, and actually the halo was implemented because of him. So I wasn't really watching F1 there, but I've seen some videos, I read some articles. So it was a safety car. There was a safety car, and there was a wet race, and he lost control in the safety car while the crane was trying to retrieve the car that crashed, and Jules Bianchi's car went straight to the tractor. And of course, F1 cars are so low, and the tractors are have a high ground clearance. So it was his head who went straight, hitting the tractor, and he didn't survive. So after 3 years, I think the Halo arrived, and since then, people haven't looked back.
I think that's a one of the positives of people getting into F1 now, outside of the spectacle and the entertainment that the sport brings. I think it's also a good reminder for people, especially those who have a common like misconception about motorsport. Like growing up, we always saw motorsport as this um YOLO thing, like you gotta go fast, or it's not entertaining enough, or it's not good enough if it's not fast, if it's not that dramatic and competitive. Like it has to be like a do or die, ride or die even kind of situation for any kind of motorsport. But I guess with a lot of people getting into F1, and hopefully it becomes a stepping stone to them getting into other types of races as well. People, the general public, is reminded that safe, like just how dangerous a motorsport is, and how responsible you should be as a driver, and even as anybody who drives in general. So like, we often forget that whenever these drivers are out on the track, their lives are also at stake, and we often forget that. So it's a really good reminder. Like, but of course, we don't want accidents to happen, just so we're reminded of those things. But it's something that I guess the generation now is educated about, that it's not just about speed, it's also about being safe and being respectful, and the camaraderie that you have amongst all the drivers. So I think that's a plus outside of a newfound following for the sport.
It's very true. Formula One has been really active with road safety. I really they
Yes.
have different campaigns in Europe. So that's a big, like a new project for them. And
Yeah.
I see why, because they have a huge following, and it's a good platform for them. It's a good platform for road safety.
Well, Formula One has always been about, well, in the recent history, it's always been about technology, in the forefront of technology and pushing the boundaries. But before, it was really, it was racing at its barest. I mean, people would, the reason it grew up around England was because that's where the shops were that would make the cars, and they would be down the road. They'd be down the road from Donington, for example, or from Silverstone, and then they would push their stuff there. And these cars wouldn't be ready until just minutes before the race. It was a different culture, and even in the 90s and 2000s, it was still very different from the way it is now. I remember which drivers died where. I remember where I was when I found out where they died. And that's a very different thing now. But there's just one thing, and this is what a lot of people don't realize. They're going to see two race cars come out, and they're going to crash. And then they're going to have these two guys fully helmeted up and ever that are going to go attack each other. They're going to go wail on the guys and so on. And they think it's ego, or they think it's, machismo or whatever. But it's not. You kind of got to remember that at that point, one guy thought he was going to die. Okay. And it scares the heck out of you when that happens. And, you get freaked out. And I've seen the calmest people in the world, Cookie Ramirez, come out of a car and just almost blast at someone. It's like, if he can do that, he's the calmest person in anything. And he's that upset because he felt I could have died right there because you did something you shouldn't have done. And everyone has their own opinion. So it's it's interesting to watch. It's fun to see. But it is a good reminder that, yeah, this is more dangerous than people realize. And luckily, instituted a lot of safety features, runoffs, better barriers, and so on, that benefit not
Yes.
just F1, but they benefit all the other people that will be running on those tracks. Okay, that includes everything from proximity to hospitals, familiarity with the track, how to get there that quickly, all these things. Formula One does bring that in, and the Formula One and FIA have sent people to the Philippines to, for appearances to inaugurate certain things and so on. So it is a big deal. So I have a question that I want to ask. Well, one of our good friends is William Herrera, and he runs Red Rock, which is basically our favorite Formula One travel group. And I want to ask him a question, and I'm going to bring it up now. Do you think Formula One should have enclosed cockpits already or not? Francis, I'm going to ask you.
Well, it depends, because Formula One is based on an open cockpit design ever since. And then now you have this sort of thing, the halo thing. I don't know. I mean, it would require an adjustment to the rules, I guess.
That's
Because
true.
as
You're
it
right.
is now,
Oh,
diba, it is based on an open
yeah,
cockpit design. So
yeah.
if you have an enclosed cockpit like that of a fighter jet, it would look better though.
It
That's
would be
the
more
one thing for
aerodynamic.
sure. It would look better.
You won't get
But
rained
I don't
on.
know. Yeah, they would have to adjust with the rules, I guess. because as it is, Formula has always been an open cockpit design. So I don't know how will that do. How will that go? But it
No, it's a
would
good
look
idea.
Yeah,
better
I
for me if
mean,
you ask me. That would look better. It would look all the more
yeah.
like a
I
fighter
mean,
jet.
there. Yeah, yeah, I see. I mean, Formula One cars are like fighter jets anyway. Anyway, there are actually new regulations for next year, 2022. The car looks very different. Uh, the lines are a bit more standard for all cars in terms of the front wing and the rear wing. There's not much of like a difference from team to team. They also limited the budget for each team because what's happening now is that the big
Yes.
budget teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, they can spend unlimited. They have unlimited cash flow, so they can spend whatever they want to develop their car. But teams like Haas, Williams, it's more of a budget constraint. So what they did for next year is there's a cap, a stricter cap. But knowing F1 teams, they find loopholes. So we'll see. So in terms of regulations, like there have been I've seen like rumors of like closed cockpit racing. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I guess this is what people felt about the Halo. I mean, if they can make it work with the regulations and if if it makes it safer for the drivers, then I don't think it would be such a bad thing.
Yeah, just imagine if the Halo were invented like years before. It would probably save Senna's
Yeah.
life, diba? You can see him
Yep.
going through the front tire, detached, and there were no teethers back then, and the tire just hit him in the head, diba? Went straight to the wall. So
Oh
just
yeah,
imagine if there was a Halo before, or like an open cockpit, closed cockpit design before, it would have saved a lot of lives. Like
well
even in
that's
the
true.
time of the
I
Schumacher
just
era, I mean, there were already no crashes that one car got stuck on top of the other before, diba? But luckily the driver
yeah
survived. I think.
yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of deaths, and that was a good thing. Okay, so Paulo, what do you think? Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Whose fault was it this weekend?
I think it was a racing incident. Because okay, I'm gonna go both sides. Uh, okay,
All right.
when Lewis went out of the pits, he did swerve left to try and close Max, but he didn't. He left some space for turn one. So in turn one, Lewis left enough space for Max. Max, being a racing driver, went for the space that was available because he's fighting for the championship. So at turn one, I didn't see much of a problem. But for turn two, I there's an argument that Lewis didn't leave enough space at turn two. But in Lewis's defense, as he says, Max wasn't close enough. His car wasn't like at front enough for Lewis to have to give space. So since Lewis didn't give enough space at turn two, Max has hit the sausage curb, which led to the crash. I think it's a racing incident.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything anymore.
Okay. Well, that's racing. That's really the way it is. Sometimes it really comes down to the opinion of the guy in the car, basically.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
One of the things. I mean, I'm obviously I'm not the world's biggest Michael Schumacher fan, and that's because I've felt that he didn't have to do some of the things he did because he was so good
Yeah,
anyway that he didn't have
yeah,
to do them.
yeah.
But having said that, I grew up at a time when when we were looking at Formula One, we would be reading these books and getting to know how all these drivers came up. And Michael Schumacher was very different from all those other drivers, from Prost, from Senna, from Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark, and all that. Not to say that they were all gentlemen. There are some massively censored stories about the British race car drivers who would get picked up in an ambulance and come out with a girlfriend, but things like that. But but now we're seeing this. Do you think anyone was being deliberately unfair and putting someone else in danger?
in that incident?
Yeah,
I don't think so. I don't think the drivers, no
right.
matter how heated the race is
Yeah.
or the championship race is, I don't think they would deliberately hurt another driver. For example, if they crash and they would like curse at each other, get mad at each other, it's usually at the heat of the moment. These guys are actually friends in real life. You would see them like get making jokes with each other, talking to each other, even the top drivers. It's really just the heat of the moment. And during the championship season, yeah, they wouldn't talk as much. But after that, you know, there's not much bad blood. Maybe the only time I would see this is between Nico Rosberg, and Lewis Hamilton. I think there's still some bad blood there, but there's always a sense of respect in the end. And there's something that caught my attention with what Carl said, with how how Schumacher was very different from the drivers that came before him, like Senna, Prost, Mansell, Jackie Stewart. It kind of made me. It reminded me of Lewis Hamilton now,
Yeah,
because that's how people see him. He's
yeah.
different from how Schumacher was, how Alonso was, how Juan Pablo Montoya was, Kimi Raikkonen. So maybe it's just a new age driver coming and dominating and changing the way we look at drivers. And maybe 10, 15 years from now, we'll be reminiscing about Lewis Hamilton. He was so different. He's the GOAT. And then there's a new guy like changing the F1 scene. Maybe just that's just how it is. It reminds me of the NBA. Like there are diehard Michael Jordan fans, and now there are diehard LeBron James fans claiming that he's the GOAT. And maybe before Jordan, people were talking about Magic Johnson. So maybe it's just per generation, there's one single guy who comes out on top and kind of changes the way we look at things. But it doesn't really make the sport any less.
Yeah.
In the end, when the careers are said and done, most of us would argue that they added a lot more to the sport. So maybe that's how it really caught my attention when Carl said that Schumacher was really different. But he didn't really but he didn't say that he's not better than those drivers of the past. It's just different. So that really caught my attention.
One thing's
And
for sure
Carl is
though, there
so
will always be
insightful.
contact. One thing's for sure though, there will always be incidents like the one that just happened. There will always be things like that being a contact sport, especially when guys are trying to overtake each other in the corners. This is where the contact really happens. So that's one thing that's not going to change.
Yeah, and it's scary. Yeah, it's scary if you've
Oh
got.
yeah.
I've only done a. Well, I've run open wheel with no wings, and they're scary because the minute the two of them get in there, you can pop, and that's what
Yeah.
happened there. So, well,
Yeah.
you know what I'm happy about is that I'm seeing someone Paulo's age actually into Formula One, and I'm hearing this is odd, but I'm hearing the starting sounds of Formula One from houses, which means that people are actually watching races. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard that in the longest time. It's very distinct, and there's certain sounds. There's one sound that James Deacon and I would always remember. It was our ringtone because there's a sound you get if you have access to the paddocks and you clear it, and that's like, and nobody in the world ever knows that sound unless they've been through there. And it's just these awesome sounds. Anyway, but I'm really glad to see that people are watching, and so let's start. Let's bring in, well, William, and then let's bring in some others, and let's see what we can talk about because I find it really really interesting. Francis, quick question: who's your favorite driver?
There's a lot there. I mean,
Top
I
three.
can name it top three. I don't know. I guess Senna, Jim Clark. Who else? I don't know, just at the top of my head, Jim Clark. I don't know, Gilles Villeneuve, because it was always sideways going
No,
for a corner.
yeah. My top aren't necessarily because they're the best drivers. They're just because of how they were or how they affected me. Like I really, really like
Yeah.
Mario Andretti, for
Yeah,
example.
Mario Andretti. Like,
I like Mika. I like David
Oh
Coulthard.
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Kimi, and there were all these guys were at different times different. Like I mean, Prost was
yeah,
considered very different at his time, right? Or people who were more technical as opposed to more passionate, or people who slid the car as opposed to keeping it on the line. So yeah. Well, anyway, anyway, point is we're really glad that there's more interest, and we're going to try and get involved in it. So thank you very, very much, everyone. Thank you for letting us chat about F1 while other people are listening. This has been Paolo with the more insightful stuff nowadays. This has been Francis, who's along the lines of the old school guys. This has been Dan, who grew up, as we have said, in a motorsports family of enthusiasts and fans. And this has been me, Carl. Thank you very, very much. Join us again where we try and get Paolo put on the spot about his opinion about a racing accident. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye everyone. Thank you.